The tribal chief finally returns, and no one saw it coming. The crowd went wild as Roman Reigns made his shocking SmackDown comeback. But did they? Did they really go wild? What we heard wasn't just a cheer, it was a sound deeper than that. It was the sound of 20,000 people collectively gasping. The sound of air being sucked out of a building, only to return as a shockwave of disbelief. The moment wasn't wild, it was. This is the story of that moment. Not just the return, but the shadow it cast. The story of the silence after the roar, the panic behind the curtain, and the one terrifying question that settled in the air long after he was gone. This is what really happened, the moment the myth walked back into the world. Imagine the scene. A standard Friday night. You're watching the show. A commercial break ends, and the camera returns to the ring for a scheduled match. The lights are bright. The crowd is humming. Everything is exactly as it should be. And then, static. A jarring electric tear in the broadcast. The lights in the arena don't just go out, they are killed. Sudden, oppressive blackness. The crowd's hum turns into a confused, nervous murmur. You can hear individual voices. What's happening? Is this part of the show? And then, nothing. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating, total silence that lasts for 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. It feels like an eternity. People aren't just in the dark. They're holding their breath. And then, a single sound. The click of a boot on the ramp. Single, focused, blue spotlight cuts through the black. It doesn't find the ring. It finds the entrance. And there he is. He's not in his ring gear. He's in a simple black suit. He just stands there. The camera slowly zooms in. The crowd, in that split second, processes the impossible. It's not a video. It's not a rumor. He is here. That is when the sound comes. It's not a pop. It's an explosion. It's a physical force. A roar of pure, unfiltered shock that shakes the camera. It's the sound of reality itself breaking. The tribal chief had returned. The roar washes over him. But he doesn't react. He doesn't raise a hand. He doesn't smile. He doesn't acknowledge the noise. He just waits. He lets the sound peak, letting the adrenaline burst through the arena. And then he does something terrifying. He begins to walk, slowly, deliberately. Each step is a hammer blow, silencing a section of the crowd. The wildness is replaced by an electric, nervous tension. People are standing, but they aren't cheering anymore. They're watching, studying. They're afraid to miss what happens next. He gets to the ring, climbs the steps, and walks to the center. He's handed a microphone. The lights come up, revealing the thousands of faces all locked on him. All those phones held up, not just to record, but to prove it was real. He stands there. The entire show, the entire multi-million-dollar broadcast has stopped. It is hostage to him. He raises the microphone. And then, he just looks down. He looks at the mat, turns, slowly surveying the kingdom he left behind. The commentary team is silent. The referees are frozen. The champion, whoever he may be, is suddenly irrelevant. Roman Reigns looks directly into the hard cam. It's into all of our homes. And there's no fire. There's no anger. There's just unsettling calm. A stillness. As if he's looking at all of us and thinking, "You really thought you could move on without me?" In the chaotic world backstage, the gorilla position is the nerve center. It's the final checkpoint before a performer walks through the curtain. And in that moment, it was pure panic. Producers were yelling into headsets. Who cleared this? Cleared this? The answer was silence. Shh. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't in the rundown. The wrestlers for the next match were standing there, their music queued up, ready to go. They just stopped. They stared at the monitor, their faces pale. Their opportunity, their segment, their spot, it just evaporated, was stolen live in front of the world. A young star, someone who was being built as the next big thing, was seen just turning around and walking back to the locker room. He knew. He knew that the mountain he was climbing just became infinitely taller. The hierarchy had not just been reset, it had been violently reestablished. The writers, the people who spend their lives crafting these stories, were just staring, papers in hand. Their entire year of plans, of carefully laid out narratives, had just gone up in smoke because he was back. And when the tribal chief is back, there is only one story. Everything else is just noise. The power shift was so immediate, so total, that the entire production truck was scrambling. Did they go to commercial? Do they cut his mic? But nobody dared. Nobody knew what this was. It wasn't a return. It was a takeover. Deeper in the building, the atmosphere wasn't panic. It was colder, more calculated. Imagine the current champion, the man who has been carrying the company for months. The man who finally felt like the show was his. He's sitting alone, lacing his boots, listening to the crowds roar through the walls. He doesn't even need to see the screen. He knows that sound. It's the sound of his reign ending. It's the sound of the shadow he thought he'd escaped, returning to cover everything. The championship belt sitting next to him, which an hour ago was the most important prize in the world, suddenly looks small. It looks like a target. Elsewhere, the wise man is seen in a dark corner. Slow, knowing smile creeps across his face. His phone is already out. The plan, whatever it is in motion. The family is back in power. For everyone else, it's a sudden, silent calculation. Friendships that were solid an hour ago are now uncertain. Allegiances are shifting. Who benefits from this? Who is ruined? And the ones who were his enemies are now terrified. The ones who were his allies are wondering if they still are. Didn't just return to the ring, return to every private conversation, every whispered ambition, every hidden fear in that building. He became the new center of gravity, and everyone was simply forced to find their new orbit. By the next morning, the world had changed. It wasn't a wrestling story anymore. It was the story. Mainstream sports networks, the ones who usually treat wrestling as a sideshow, were leading with it. A stunning return sends shockwaves through the sports entertainment world. They used business terms. Market value, brand integration, disruption. They tried to analyze it like a stock, but they missed the point. This wasn't a stock. This was a storm. The online world, the podcast sphere, the insiders, they were in a frenzy. A dozen contradictory confirmed reports, signed a massive new contract. He was unhappy with the direction. He came back to save the company. He came back to bury the new champion. The truth became irrelevant. The narrative was all that mattered. And Roman Reigns is the narrative. He didn't just rejoin the story, he hijacked it. Every other feud, every other title, every other personal journey that fans were invested in. It was all paused. It was all rendered secondary. The entire creative engine of a global company was now forced to stop, turn around, and focus on one single point. The network was thrilled. The merchandise department was already printing new shirts, but the writers, they were staring at a blank page because their story didn't matter anymore. Only his did. The whole world was now waiting, not for the next show, but for his next word. And the fans, the universe. They were split right down the middle. It was not a simple, happy reunion. It was a complex emotional schism. On one side, pure joy. The fans who felt the product was lesser without him, the ones who craved cinema, who craved the final boss energy. For them, this was validation. Acknowledge him. They typed, the fire emojis flooding the timeline. They felt like their faith had been rewarded. The real main event was back. The show had felt like it was missing its star, and now the star had returned. They didn't just want him back. They needed him back. Needed the gravity that only he provides. But then, there was the other side. Quieter, more anxious side. The fans who were enjoying the new era. It's the ones who loved seeing new stars get the spotlight. The ones who felt like for the first time in years, the show was free. And now they felt a familiar, cold dread. It was the feeling of seeing a ceiling you thought was gone, suddenly rebuilt, thicker and lower than ever. But why? They posted. We were moving on. We were building new things. They weren't angry. They were sad. Worried. Worried that the stories they cared about had just been canceled, replaced by a rerun, no matter how good that rerun was. This wasn't just a wrestler returning. It was a debate about the very philosophy of storytelling. Is it about one all-powerful sun, or a galaxy of different stars? We focus on the champion. We focus on the fans. But what about the family? What about the blood, the cousins, the ones who were left behind to navigate the rubble of his first kingdom? Imagine being them. Do you get a phone call first? Hey, I'm coming back tonight? Or do you find out just like the rest of us? Do you watch him walk out on a monitor? Your stomach dropping, realizing your life just changed all over again? This isn't just a TV show for them. It's that name, that lineage. It is a very real, very heavy burden. When he was gone, they were finally forced to find out who they were without him. They were building their own identities. They were stepping out of the shadow. And now, the shadow has returned. And it's taller than ever. Does he see them as his soldiers, ready to fall back in line? Or does he see them as failures? As the ones who couldn't hold the island while he was gone? The pressure is immediate. Is this a reunion, or is this a judgment? The family dynamic, the most complex story of all, is suddenly back on the table. Every betrayal, every moment of weakness, every attempt at independence, it's all back. He's the head of the table. And he's returned to find others have been sitting in his chair. That night, the family didn't just get their chief back. They got their greatest conflict back. We see the icon. We see the tribal chief. We see the cold, calculating, untouchable myth. But what about the man? What about the human being who has to carry all of this? Imagine him hours later. The show is off the air. Now the arena is dark and empty. The trucks are packing up. He's in a quiet hotel room. The silence, a deafening contrast to the roar he commanded. He's just sitting on the edge of the bed, the black suit still on. The adrenaline is gone, and all that's left is the exhaustion and the pressure. The pressure to be that, to be the myth. He knows that by walking through that curtain, he just signed a new contract, not with the company to whom he is an asset, but with the audience. A contract that demands perfection, a contract that demands he be larger than life every single second. Is there a part of him that wishes he could just not? The man who has beaten everyone, the man who has beaten illness, the man who has nothing left to prove, what is he afraid of? Maybe he's not afraid of losing a match. Maybe he's afraid of losing relevance. Maybe he was at home, watching the show move on, watching new faces in his spot. And maybe this return wasn't about power or a title. Maybe it was about the deepest, most human fear of all. The fear of being forgotten. The fear that the world might actually be fine without him. This return wasn't a show of strength. It was an act of survival. We are all asking the wrong question. We ask who is next. We ask what is next. We are all focused on the championship. We're focused on the next big stadium show. We assume he is back for the gold. We assume he is back to reclaim his throne. But what if that look in his eye wasn't about that? What if the cameras had stayed on him, just a few seconds longer after the show went off the air? We would have seen him look past the champion, past the crowd, past the wise man. What if he was looking at the company itself? At the very structure. He's already completed the game. He held the title for 1,000 days. He beat everyone. The cycle is done. So there's nothing left to prove. So, why come back? Unless the return itself was the point, he didn't come back to win another match. He came back to win the argument. To prove in one definitive, shocking moment that the entire ecosystem, the entire billion-dollar machine, is completely and totally reliant on him. That he is the needle. That he is the system. It wasn't about being the main event. It was about proving that he alone is the event. And in doing so, he exposes the one truth the company never wants us to see, that the entire kingdom is built on his shoulders, and that he can choose to shrug at any time. And this is the real story. It's the part that no one is talking about. We think we just witnessed the beginning of a new chapter, a new reign, a new era of dominance. We're all bracing for the next war. We think we are on page 1. But what if we are wrong? What if we just witnessed the last page? Think about it. The unannounced return, the cold, quiet stare, the black suit, not ring gear, the lack of a single word. It wasn't the act of a king returning to his throne. It was the act of a man visiting his own monument. Didn't come back to fight. He came back to see. To stand in the center of the world he built, one last time, and feel that energy. To remind himself of who he was. All the chaos, all the panic, all the fan debate, it's all based on the assumption that he is here to stay. But his goal was already accomplished. The goal was the return. To create the single biggest moment of the year out of thin air, just by existing. and then to leave, to walk away. Not because he was beaten, not because he was injured, but because he can. It's the ultimate acknowledgement of power. He didn't come back to take the championship. He came back to show everyone, himself included, that the championship never mattered. He was always the prize. The shock wasn't his return. The real shock is that we may never see him again.